And when you think about respect for people, it's about respecting the fact that it's a human being, respecting the fact that there's pride, there's honor. You as a leader are not providing the tools, the processes, the designs that allow that person to do a good job.
Thanks for tuning in to Flow at the Source, where leaders like you share the ideas that help them improve flow and business performance. Welcome to Flow at the Source. I am Tomas Reyes. I'm pretty excited about my guest today. I'm going to reveal his name in a second. Uh, some leaders teach us a lot of methodologies, principles. Others change the way we see work. Today's guest is one of those leaders for me, Miguel Dalmau. I had the privilege of knowing Miguel since our early days at General Electric. And for over more than 3 decades, I've watched him lead operations across remarkably different industries and organizations, from GE to Danaher to Amgen to serving as a COO for a company down in Puerto Rico. Despite those very different environments, I've always recognized the same way of thinking, a way of leading that brings people closer to the work, closer to the customer, and closer to reality. So, welcome, Miguel, and thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you, Tomas, and thanks for having me. Real pleasure.
Thank you. So, one thing that impressed me throughout your career is not simply the number of roles you held, is how consistently you apply a consistent way of thinking across completely different industries. You worked in defense electronics, electrical products, engineer to order manufacturing, industrial motors, Danaher, biotechnology, and also global operations. So, looking back, what early experiences shaped the way you learned to observe operations and understand flow and improve organizations, and how that perspective remained relevant through such a diverse career?
Thanks for that. And thanks for your question. I think early on in the career, I had a great opportunity to participate in a rotational program with General Electric. It was a 2 year, two different businesses, four different assignments, and that gave me the perspective of how things work in diverse environment, whether it was a high volume or a low volume, union operation, non-union operation, high tech, low tech, in actually different geographies of the world, and how at the end of the day it's the same pursuit for excellence that everybody wants. And one of the things that I learned early on was that it doesn't matter how much people get paid. It doesn't matter where in the world people grew up or people are working. In general, people want to do a good job. People show up in the morning, going to work, and knowing that they want to do a good job. Very little people show up and say, you know what, today I'm going to do a bad job. I'm going to really not do my best and just not make it happen. So if you start with that belief that everybody is showing up trying to do a good job, and if something's not working, it's not necessarily their fault. It's something that we have to look for to see what's really going on and how do we help that person. Again, regardless of what environment you work with. So going back to your question, early on, the opportunity of seeing that within such diverse environments in different geographies, still we were looking for the same kinds of things was something that stuck with me. That as we continued growing and learning throughout the career, you just expand on that. You continue building upon the same kinds of things, and you go to new geographies, you go to new companies, you go to new industries, and guess what? You're gonna find the same kind of situations, same human beings trying to do a really good job, and similar roadblocks that people are being faced with, and your job is to figure out how to break those roadblocks.
Thanks for watching. And a brief pause to ask you for a big favor. If you find this content relevant to you or people in your network, will you please subscribe and help us spread the word? This will help us grow as a community and secure guests and topics that are always more relevant to your journey. Thanks again for tuning in. Appreciate it. Excellent. Thank you. So one pattern I noticed earlier is in your career is the tendency to shorten the distance between people and reality. Instead of more reports, you visited suppliers, whether they were internal or external, it didn't matter. Actually, personally, I had a situation where, we were getting bad parts from one of the sister plants, and you told me, why don't you go and pay them a visit? I annoyed a lot of people, but we solved the problems at the root. And I made a friend. After annoying them, then they became my friend. So, but instead of also telling the operators, hypothetical stories about the customers, you put a bunch of people, operators, on an airplane to visit a customer, and you went with them. Nice pictures there as well. Um, so, so instead of managing flow from an office, which we had at the time, you walk the routes yourself. You kind of travel with the people. The one thing I noticed is it's a lot of joy. So whatever you were doing, you were in the moment enjoying, whatever was going on at the time.
Mhm.
So what are in those from those experiences? What are the things that you learned about leadership that cannot be learned from reports, meetings, or dashboards?
So Tomas, thank you. I want to go back to that point I mentioned earlier about the philosophy, the mindset that people want to do a good job, and and when you go to the other person's place, when you go to the customer's place, when you go to a supplier's place, you know how many times we thought, this supplier is being such a bad supplier. We're gonna go see this supplier. We're gonna go talk to this supplier because he is not doing a good job, only to show up there and learn that 90% of the problem is created by you and not the supplier, right? So so just going there, just going there
Interesting.
and having the conversation and understanding, okay, what's going on and how can we help, makes a big difference. So you've heard later on how concept of like go see, go feel, but in reality, it's basics. And it's very similar. I compare what we do in the lean realm and in process improvements and optimization, similar to what doctors do. And it's really hard for a doctor to to make a diagnosis without actually seeing the patient, touching the patient, feeling the patient, right? So it's very similar. And I remember a long time ago, one of my daughters asked me, "Dad, what do you do?" And I was like, "Oh, geez, that's a tough question." And what came out, I said, it's like your mother. Your mother's a doctor, and it's very similar. So here's what happens. You get a phone call, and the patient, you hear from the patient, "Hey, I'm not feeling well." Oh, okay. So what are you feeling? And you start gathering the information of what is happening, what is the person feeling, what is the organization feeling. And then you start getting the reports. You have to see the reports, right? Just as a doctor see the labs. You're going to see the labs, you're going to see the data, and and you start making some correlations between what the patient's feeling with what the labs are saying. And same thing in organization. You start hearing things and you start seeing, the KPIs, all the different numbers, the metrics, and you start, making some correlations there. But you still have to go see. You still have to go to the place and then walk it, feel it. And it's something that you only learn through experience, and you walk the shop and you hear the noise and you can feel the humming or not. And I remember two experiences, one really early in my career, one really late. Very early on, we had this CEO that would come to the plant. His name was Lloyd Trotter, and we would walk the shop, and we were in the fabrication shop in the stamping operations, and he would just go like, "Okay, hang on, hang on. You need to stop that die. That die is gonna break if you don't stop it." And you would go like, "Wow." and lo and behold, you go there and check it out, and certainly, so he had that experience from years of having worked there. And that again, that's walking, feeling, and hearing the shop. And then later in my career, late in life, and when I was running an operation as a chief operating officer, I brought the CEO to the floor, and I said, "Let's walk the floor, and what I want you to feel is how this motor, how this engine in this car is just not. It just doesn't sound right. It just doesn't feel right, and we don't know what yet. We don't know why, but it just doesn't feel right." And we did. We walked the shop, and he said, "Yeah." So we started doing some work, and after several years of work, I remember walking back to the shop, and I said, "Okay, now let's go listen to that F1 fine tune," and you could sense it. So so there's nothing that can compare, or nothing that you can do better than just going to see. That's why perhaps in the Japanese environment, in lean environment, they say, hey, you have to go to Gemba. Go to Gemba, go see, go feel. Otherwise, it just doesn't jive. And that made a big difference for us early on in life, both in trips that we did with our employees to go see customers, as well as vice versa. There were many times that we would invite customers, come on, you got to go see our facility, you got to see our operations. And that created a different feel, a different relationship, a different understanding of each other, that I think carried on throughout my career and really, really helped in many different ways.
Awesome. Thanks again. And when I put that in the perspective of, again, operational excellence through the G lens and the Danaher lens, that from what I understand from the outside, it's a lot more prescriptive and it's a lot more granular, um, and more persistent. And then Amgen, highly regulated business and things that go inside the human body. So, as you look across those organizations, what do you think separates those that truly focus on flow and process improvement versus places where, even in different companies within the same organization, you might have teams where you might just see elements of implementing terminologies and tools, but not really the philosophy. So, what do you think separate those kinds of places?
Well, you're absolutely right. There is a very big different level of complexity, and a very different level of regulation depending where you are. Um, it doesn't make one thing necessarily more difficult than the other. And I'll give you perhaps two extreme examples. Um, in my last role, I was working in a company that we make windows and doors. And when you really think about it, it's aluminum windows, aluminum doors, and some of them have glass. So easy. All you got to do is buy aluminum and glass and figure out how to cut them and put them together, and that's it. And as simple as that sound, it was probably the most difficult, most complex environment that I ever worked in my life. Okay, for many different reasons. And when you go to a different environment, like say, for example, a biotechnology or a biopharmaceutical company or a pharmaceutical company, or companies that are highly regulated, whether if the FDA or if the FAA in the aerospace realm, there's some things you just can't do, and you have to understand that very well, very fast. So make sure you don't go there. But that leaves a big group of things that you can still do. And that's really where the focus has to go, where don't worry about what you cannot do, worry about everything you can do. And there's so many possibilities and so many opportunities. For example, when you really think about a pharmaceutical process, well, it is an approved process. You have to follow the process by the book. You cannot just say, "Oh, just change that dial and just make this different to make it faster." You can't do that. Okay. So and in any biotechnology environment, cells are going to do what the cells are going to do. That's it. But but there's so many things in the periphery of that, surrounding that, in the procedures, in the transactional processes that you can still work with it and pursue. That just the opportunities continue to happen. That's why even within those kind of industries and companies with high technology, you have companies that are winners and companies that are not. If everybody followed the recipe, it would be easy. But no, and it comes down to similar things. It comes down to the discipline. It comes down to the leadership. It comes down to the humility of the people working there and trying to understand how to improve things, understanding and allowing themselves to accept that it doesn't matter what are you doing, you can do it better. You can always do it better every day, all the time. So that's something that I learned throughout the different works and industries that I worked at, is that there was always good opportunities to pursue. Some people would call them initially the low-hanging fruits. You go after those, and then that continues to open more opportunities and more things. It's like a follow-up questions. You ask this really easy question, and then in the answer you go like, oh, talk to me a little bit more about that, and then you continue on that, and then you continue pulling, and you can go deep and find some really good opportunity. But again, I think at the end of the day, you mentioned it earlier in the question. You said, listen, this is a philosophy. It's a mindset, and that's one thing that makes a big difference for people that are practitioners, for people that are leading in this environment, is to understand that, hey, it's a mindset that it doesn't matter how good you're doing it, you can always do it better. You can always improve by 1 second, by 2 seconds. You can always improve by 1 inch, by 2 inch, and you'll be amazed. That adds up. You'll be amazed. What kind of result you get out of that.
Awesome. Awesome. Um, you make it hard because some of the questions you actually answer so completely. The follow up, but the when one of the things I observed very early is that how people wanted to solve problems with you, not simply for you. I remember, the excitement of people working with you on solving problems on the floor, and I saw that in multiple. So I saw that in North Carolina. I saw that in Puerto Rico, in other places, Alabama, and how do you create as a leader the environment where people genuinely care about quality, about customers? You touched on a lot of that already, but this sort of people feeling invested and they want to see you win as a leader. They just don't want to win for themselves, but they also want to see you win. How does that happen? What builds that?
Yeah, Tomas, I think just like in everything, um, colors show. When you're just making it up, um, people can read that. And people can read that you're BSing. People can read that you're being honest or not. And you have to be a true believer to be able to go and evangelize. You have to really believe that what you're trying to teach works. And there's many times that I've been in situations where I said, "Listen, guys, I know it feels weird, but I'm just gonna ask you to trust for a minute and try it." And I don't say that taking the risk that it's not gonna work. I say it because I've seen the movie and I've seen it many times and I see that it works. So I'm a true believer that that works. And now I'm seeing that you're not. So my job is to help you get to that point where you're also getting to the point to believe. It comes back to the discussion we had about go visit a customer and go understand that why, when you put that screw in the wrong place, why is that a problem to the customer? It's not because he want to be a hard one or a difficult one. There's a reason for that. And why, if you don't do something correctly, once it's installed and it later on in the process, it all breaks up and it creates a big problem. So so being a true believer, um, showing to the team what you're trying to go after, finding early wins, finding things that you can share. We're in this together, and that's something that, of course, we hear and we say a lot. We say, hey, we win and lose together, and that has to be part of it. And again, you go back to the concept I mentioned earlier about the point that, hey, people want to do a good job. Again, there's not many employees that want to build something and want to do it with bad quality. If they build it with bad quality, all right, let's understand why. Well, the person wasn't trained correctly. We didn't have enough poker yokes or enough design quality in the design, and that goes back to one of the lean concepts, of that we follow as one of the pillars, which is respect for people. And when you think about respect for people, it's not about, oh, I don't respect this guy, right? It's about respecting the fact that it's a human being, respecting the fact that there's pride, there's honor, the person wants to do a good job. And you, as an engineer, you as a manager, you as a leader, are not providing the tools, the processes, the designs that allow that person to do a good job. And if that is about the quality for a customer, but you got to show them that. You got to show them why that's a situation, and work with them. So you have to be part of this. This is like a body, and you must be passionate about it. You must be involved, and be part of the problem, and of course of the solution. And I think that's something that helped me throughout my career. I'll be honest, there are many times that I went the other way. There are many times I said, "Listen, guys, I don't get it. I don't believe it. I don't even gonna touch it, because I don't think we're gonna go there. I don't think it's gonna work. I don't think what you're trying to sell, is gonna get there." So again, it goes back to the honesty, the integrity, the authenticity in everything you're doing. And as people begin to trust you and trust not only your skills, knowledge, experience, but also you as a person, as a professional, then there's a lot that we can do together with the team.
Awesome. Um, Again, so I'm hearing humility, honesty, integrity, and then that builds trust and feeling, walking in their shoes, if you will. So now, if you could go back to your younger self, that young MMP, manufacturing management program graduate, what would you tell yourself that you believe will also help rising manufacturing leaders and other leaders out there? What in terms of what beliefs stay uh, constant, and which ones do you have to unlearn so that you could be more successful? And again, this is aimed at people earlier in their career. Um, Anything that you think is worth sharing?
So I remember very early, in the early days of GE, back in the Jack Welch times, um, he came out with the we used to call it the three S's.
Mm-hmm.
It was called the speed, simplicity, and self-confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, simple terms. Um, Very deep if you want to, if you really start thinking about that. And one of the things, I'm going to start from the end. One of the things that I would like to perhaps suggest that you unlearn, the whole self-confidence. It's a tough one, because self-confidence, it's something that perhaps you develop um, with the years of experience, with the years of making mistakes, years of falling apart and having to come back together. And that's how you develop that self confidence, knowing that, hey, I've been in this route and it worked, or I've been in this route and it didn't work. I remember hearing the other day or seeing one of those quote studies that you get memes on, and I believe was Edison that said, "Hey, I never made a mistake. I learned a million ways of not how to not do things." Right. Uh, so that's one thing that comes to mind on the self confidence is it's something that you have to learn to take the risk. You have to, and early on it's difficult because of course you just graduated as an engineer, you know it all. You don't want to show anybody that you don't know, and no, you have to go for it. You have to take risks. You have to, take measured risk, and of course make mistakes. So that's something that I would perhaps suggest. Hey, early on in your career, go for it. Try things, move, make mistakes. It's the time to do it. um, the things that I think I would suggest on the perhaps a little more on the positive side. There's some values, some intrinsic values that define each person, and they're very different from person to person. But perhaps there are some values that, in my opinion, must be standard across the board. And if you don't have those, then you should work in getting them. And they're basic things like discipline. Okay, having the discipline on pursuing things and completing things, on getting things done, on being on time, respecting people. And these are things that in many times we say, hey, if you hire an engineer, you assume that comes with it because, of course, to graduate as an engineer, they have to go through that. Uh, but it's important to make sure that you develop that discipline and that you're disciplined in the approach of the things you're doing, that you're disciplined in the processes you're installing. Integrity is another one that comes to mind, and frankly, it's something that as you grow older, it becomes more and more and more important, and you learn how important that is. You start seeing how people early in their careers, didn't follow their integrity, and how that crashed really fast, or how that created big problems later on. So having the integrity across the board, having people trust, that when they call you and you say something, that's what's going to happen. If you say that, listen, I don't think I can commit to that, it's because you can't. So there's trust that is extremely important, and that's happening because of the values that you carry with the integrity. Another one that so of course is accountability or self accountability, and it goes along with those two, with the discipline and the integrity, and just being accountable. You made a mistake, hey, own it, own it, say it, learn it, move forward, and do your very best to not do it again. Same thing, when there is a success, own it, learn it, move on, and use it again. So there's more. I mean, we could talk through different additional values, but I think each person, each professional, each of us have to define what works for you, what's important for you. I think experiences in life that you go through, of course, teach you on which are more important and for what reasons. Um, but but I think if you carry the simple values of having the discipline, of having integrity, um, and of being accountable, of having accountability, I think that's going to get people really, really far. And particularly for some of the young folks, as I mentioned earlier, take the risk. Measured risk, of course. Don't do crazy stuff. But listen, you're giving an opportunity for a job you're not sure you can do it. Take it. Take it and give it a shot and do your best, and you'll see how you can grow up to that opportunity. I was having a conversation once with one of my career leaders, still a friend and a mentor, and one of the things that he mentioned, he says, Miguel, the reason why we are where we are is because somebody at some point in our careers took a huge risk on us and gave us an opportunity that perhaps we didn't deserve, that perhaps we thought we were not ready for, and but they gave us an opportunity, and you know what? We took it. They helped us out, and we succeeded. That's where we got here. And we need to make sure that we're doing that with the younger folks, with the people that are following our careers, in supporting them in making sure that they can take those opportunities and move forward.
That's a wrap, Miguel, and thank you so much. I appreciate it. Um, I can't tell you how happy I am to having the opportunity of connecting with you on something like this. I thought I knew everything. I didn't. So thanks so much.
It
Yeah.
was my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Thomas.
Thanks for listening to Flow at the Source, produced by TBR Changeworks and hosted by Tomas Reyes. These conversations aim to support the thinking that turns improvement ideas into sustainable action. We thank our guests for sharing their perspectives. Those views are their own.